So you've heard about some of the stories from the Battle of Ramadi. You've heard about Task Unit Bruiser, but what you have to understand is that Task Unit Bruiser consisted of two platoons, Charlie Platoon and Delta Platoon. Leif was the officer in charge of Charlie Platoon. I was the assistant platoon commander in Delta Platoon. And these two platoons, they have different cultures to them. There's even a little bit of rivalry, like sibling rivalry between the two platoons. And for the previous year before this deployment, you have to understand we trained and prepared to ultimately operate as independent, separate platoons. But when we got to Ramadi, because of the way the battlefield was laid out and the dynamics of what was going on there, we found ourselves in a situation where all of a sudden we were having to interop with one another, where we were conducting operations in Delta Platoon with a couple of guys from Charlie Platoon. Charlie Platoon would be conducting operations, and myself and a couple of guys from Delta would join them. We would conduct mutually supporting overwatch positions to support one another and an infantry unit down in the street. And we're able to do that and work together. We were able to set aside our rivalry, our little competition, because we had good relationships and we kept the mission and the team first. And as much as that's true in the Battle of Ramadi and what happened in Task Unit Bruiser, the same is true in the business world. After that deployment, that was my last deployment on active duty. I went into the reserves and transitioned into the business world, and I went into the mortgage business, because, that's a natural transition, right? Like jumping out of planes, blowing things up. Go do. By the way, anybody remember what was going on in real estate in like 07, 08 time frame? Not great timing, Needless to say, my transition from active duty was a struggle. But I found myself in the mortgage business, and I was a loan officer. So I'm really in a classic sales role. And if you've ever bought a house, the person that you interacted with the most was that loan officer. And that loan officer, their compensation is tied to closing loans, right? We're financially incentivized to close deals. But you also know, if you've ever bought a house, that you didn't get you didn't close that loan, you didn't get the keys to the house until your loan was reviewed and approved by an underwriter. Now, underwriters, they're different cats, right? Now, they're people. I don't know if they go to heaven, but, but they are people. And see, underwriters, they're not commissioned. They are salaried. They are not financially incentivized to approve or close a loan. And that's by design. And so what starts to happen is this classic silos between sales and operations, and a little bit of friction, and sometimes even an antagonistic relationship forms between loan officers and underwriters. Loan officers start to see underwriters as literally standing in the way of them closing their deals, right? Like, we're the salespeople. We close deals. We put points on the board. We put the puck in the net, right? And we see the underwriter like the goalie standing in the way. And underwriters, they start to see loan officers like, what are they trying to slip past me this time? What's he hiding from me on this one? That's very common. And I'll never forget, I had this loan one time I was working on, and the borrower had a challenging situation, something going on with her credit. It was like a car repossession. So it was a little dicey if we were going to be able to get this done or not. So we put the deal together, send it into underwriting, loan approval comes back. I pull out the approval, and I immediately am like, okay, like what are we dealing with here? What are we gonna have to work through here to get this deal done? No mention of the car repossession. I'm like, oh, we're good to go. All I got to do is keep my mouth shut, and this deal is going to close. I'm going to put some points on the board. Here's the thing. That would have been a short-term tactical win, but it would have been a long-term strategic loser. Got on the phone, called my underwriter. I said, hey, look, I'm looking through this approval. I don't see any mention of this car repossession. Like, are we good to go? And she was mortified. She was like, oh my gosh, I completely missed it on the credit report. Now, the end of the story is that we were able to work through that together. We were able to get letters of explanation, show the history, things like that, and ultimately get the loan approved. But here's what happened. No longer did she see me like every other loan officer who was trying to slip one past her. And because we were able to work through that problem together, I didn't see her as standing in my way. I knew this was a person that I could work with. We were able to break down those silos and work together. And as a result, my relationship and rapport with this underwriter flourished. My business grew, and we were able to close more loans. And like Leif mentioned, We have this saying at Echelon Front that the opposite of cover and move is, that's not my job. And if you hear yourself starting to say that or think that, little alarm bells should go off that you might be violating the concept of cover and move. And if you think about that story I just told you, it's literally not my job to worry about what the underwriter has to worry about. But if I had taken that approach, what would have happened? It would have hurt the overall team, would have hurt the underwriter, eventually would have hurt me. But in this case, because of cover and move, we're able to close more loans, and ultimately we're able to help more people. And that's the power of relationships and the power of cover and move.